All right, well, we'll call this meeting to order. This is the City of Nacogdoches Development Corporation, December the 4th, 2025, and we'll call the meeting to order. The first thing we'll have are, citizen comments. Do we have any?
So
Okay.
there's no open forum on this agenda.
Okay.
So we usually start with the pledge. We do have that on the agenda.
Okay, well, let's just start that then.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
Okay, then we'll go ahead and start with the regular agenda. First item, agenda 3A, is receive an update on the filing of an application for tax exempt status for the City of Nacogdoches Development Corporation.
Mr. President, members of the board, Jerry Baker, City Attorney. As the board may recall, the last meeting I was asked to begin the process for applying for tax exempt status. So I just want to kind of give you an update where we are. Unfortunately, I don't have very good news. So I don't know if it's a result of the shutdown or whatever, but for about 3.5 weeks, I tried to file for an EIN online. And unfortunately, I kept getting the same error message every time. And so they were saying every message was the system's down or something to that effect, and try again later. So I kind of got frustrated with that. So basically, I have filed the application by fax. We have confirmation they received the fax, but as far as the status of their acceptance of that and the issuance of the EIN, we don't have any information on that. My paralegal attempted throughout the day to call the IRS and get an update on that, and to no effect. So that's kind of where we are, and that's kind of the first step. And until we get that first step, we can't really go forward with anything else. And so, unfortunately, that's the update I have for you.
There's something we have to do to this for the state also?
There will be. Once we get the EIN, we'll open a bank account, and then we'll begin the application process with the state comptroller's office as well as with the IRS for the tax exempt status.
I'll say this: my son's opening a store in Montgomery. Yes, he's having the same problem that we are. It's an error message pops up.
Yeah, I've been doing this for 20-something years, setting up dozens upon dozens of corporations and LLCs, and I've never seen anything like it. So it's usually pretty instantaneous. Once you submit that online, they submit you the certificate.
They may have overdosed it.
They may have.
There's, let's just say, coordinating with some different agencies, there's a lot of personnel issues in where people should be or not right now.
In the past, we usually get them within a day or so.
Oh, yeah.
But I haven't tried recently, so I'm sure it is clogged up. Well,
But-
thank you. Any questions for Baker before we move on?
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we'll move to the regular agenda, item 3B. Receive an update from the City of Nacogdoches regarding downtown and A.L. Mangum Jr. Regional Airport planning efforts.
I don't normally get up here to stand, but rather than fall asleep, let me go ahead and do that this time. Thank you, Mary Frances. I bet you I could push that button better than I can push this button. So I'm going to give you all kind of an overview on two plans that were recently adopted by City Council or accepted. One, the downtown plan, and again, I'm going to hit the high points. There are a whole lot of slides, but just so y'all kind of get the gist of what we did, why we did it, why it was accepted, and where we go from here. Let's see here. Do I point this at? Okay, so again, just this week, this was about I think it ended up being about 8 months. It was supposed to be about 6, but we did hold off for some additional refinement. Plus, you had the shutdown in there. That did give us a little more time. The plan was materially completely finished. That being said, that was actually some good time in there to further refine some of those concepts, and Robert's probably, and members of the committee are also aware of some of those, so that there's never rush to a mistake, but I think this plan synthesizes the prior planning efforts, the good things from it, efforts from 20-plus years ago, including looking at a potential amphitheater, and then looking at where we are right now with the work that's going on with the Elliott Electric headquarters, with kind of where we are with our building, with a future that might even include, that will include a new fire station on the other side, on the far side of downtown, and also the really tying everything together to highest and best use. So let me give kind of an overview. There's really 4 core areas that the plan focused on. And one thing we emphasized, I think we had, how many folks on the downtown committee? Let's see, total, actually 5, 6, roughly.
5 to 7.
Yeah. So what we wanted was focus limited to high-level, impactful, implementable project areas with folks that could make very conscientious decisions in terms of taking in some of the data and then providing input back to the consultant team, which did a lot of refinement on each of these. So one was doing a full assessment of the current parking situation, and then what the parking situation would be at highest and best use of all the buildings downtown. And so that was part of it. So of course that facility, what they call a promenade on Bonita Creek, which would also provide connectivity. And this is, again, we had citizen input through surveys. We had the prior input from the prior planning exercises. One thing that popped in there was some of the pedestrian amenities, as well as the farmer's market. That was something else. So that promenade would connect all the way ultimately to the farmer's market, and that obviously takes some cleanup underneath the bridge of, where we even have residual property and stuff, kind of a storage area, but also through Festival Park, and then ultimately down to the soccer fields, where we're even acquiring some additional right-of-way with UP, which might dovetail very nicely with some of the improvements when we get to the parking facility. Festival Park had proposed improvements that were looked at some time ago, including, we looked at everything from SFA baseball. Actually, ironically, we did land a minor league team, which is really cool, but it's highest best use what you got. But also the concert nexus and events, and also even the recent experience with the last few rig downs on, has it already reached capacity downtown? And I think when we hit our peak, we have. And then the buildings, the public facilities such as ours, plus some of the others that are privately held. And then this was the general scope of work. I won't get into all of it, but it was, again, looking at all the strategic projects in play, an analysis on the parking, diving into what is fundable and implementable. We have prepared, actually we went in the last cycle of, when we kicked off this project, the consultant team actually submitted something on the federal process. However, as we know, everything got doged, and the only things that got funded were the prior years of things that got canceled. So that's what most of the delegation supported, was just the things that they had submitted that barely got through the first time and then got canceled in the prior year. So that being said, we're going to submit to the Economic Development Administration this month, approximately $20 million project. We did have, again, we had 5 downtown stakeholder, or downtown committee meetings, you had stakeholder interviews, and we did an online survey that I believe had more input or similar input to the SFA master plan, which I think it had over 700, which was, and I think the SFA master plan may have been in that range. And the interesting thing is, between those two, the kind of things to do and concerts and things to do downtown did pop in some of their survey materials as well. Centralized parking facility, yes, there's need for it. Couple hundred spaces. Right now, even just with the construction going on and Elliott's lot, the former Regions Bank building, that being blocked, or the bulk of it being blocked off, we have a premium on spots. You notice there seems to be a lot more pedestrian activity anyway as SFA is growing, as more parents are in town. So we identified that need. We have it now. If all of these buildings were full, we would definitely have a problem. So that does work to address that. I think the net number of spots, if everything is taken to highest and best use, is about an additional 300 spaces. And so I think right now our deficiency just right now is probably closer to 100, but thus the need for a garage probably in the 300 some odd space range ultimately. So these are, okay, so keep in mind, this has a 30% contingency. Like right now, there's currently a 200 space deficit right now. The Wright Story building next to us, if the fire station were to be redeveloped, obviously this building has limited space as well for even people coming to meetings. And then the Elliott building will have ultimately, and correct me if I'm wrong, about 120 FTEs there. And then with that, you're probably going to get some additional businesses, most of which do not have dedicated dedicated off-street parking. So, as proposed, the centralized parking facility has some flexibility to it. One of the options would take it up over 300 spaces. We're going to go ahead and move forward on a submittal to the feds, really looking at probably, a $20 million project. We are approaching it in such a way that if Elliott Electric decides to move forward for just their needs, we're going to be working with them. Council just approved a letter of intent at the last meeting, and that would be working towards a scenario that would not hold them up, allow them to make some of their improvements, and if we can obtain federal funds, we can effectively attach either maybe an elevator shaft, maybe an extra floor on the back end. So we're trying to have our cake and eat it too, and plus that would almost constitute really overmatch of that project. And this would be through the Economic Development Administration. If you notice, we may have another pic. Okay, here you go. So as proposed, the parking facility is pulled up closer to Pillar Street, staying out of the floodplain. So that creates additional green space opportunities, and it slows the flow of water actually instead of accelerating it down towards the creek. So the other issue is obviously if you pull it up closer to a less impactful grade, you get folks closer to downtown proper instead of having to walk basically equivalent of a football field uphill. So in real world usage, this proposed footprint would also, it would solve that need. We included in it proposed 11,000 square feet of mixed use space. And part of the goal of that would be, one, to activate some additional activity because there's probably, as we grow, there's going to be more need for some additional retail downtown or other storefronts on the ground level. However, that can also be an item that can be leased. Once you net it out, you can then take the net proceeds and use that for the operations and maintenance of that facility. So what we're trying to do is build into the pro forma a way to reduce the O&M cost if this is a public/public-private garage. So, and then, of course, do you have any questions on that? Because, again, the goal is to be as cost neutral for all parties at the end of the day. And yes, the more intensive you build, the more intensive your cost of maintenance usually is.
So at this point, there wouldn't be a fee for parking there?
Right now, that was something that came up as proposed. I don't think I think it'd be something could be looked at down the road when you got to a more intense level that you had even more of a premium. But I think if we get to that issue, that might also beg the question, with the other public lot that's there downtown, do you look at spreading? Do you spread it? Do you put a parking deck somewhere else where you have, because at that point, you can only go so high. We'd like to build in the ability to, let's say Elliott builds two floors, build in the ability to add a third. But I think you would look at demand, and our goal with this, again, is more commerce, not a money grab. Yes, it needs to be able to pay for itself in terms of the O&M. Now, special events, it could be, let's say let's say that we have an amphitheater and there's a concert. Could you look at scenarios that might have even it's $5 parking fee to help defray that cost, to help add to to benefit the O&M? Yes, I think that would be something we could look at. But I'd like to have the problem first, where everything is so successful, and then do a very slow incremental approach. Maybe it's $1, maybe it's $2. I can tell you, having worked on transit projects, when you start collecting money, that alone has a cost associated with it. So there has to be enough, and then God forbid you put in a pay station that also has a maintenance cost, and some of them would surprise you, and also surprise you how often, like, someone gets frustrated, they'll just drive through it with an F-250. So you have all that to account for. So there has to be enough of a benefit to collect that. And so that's one thing I would remind. The other thing is, again, the goal would be to get more people to downtown consistently in the off-peak or even during the peak, get them to the cash register and recycle that dollar within the community.
There used to be, everybody probably.
Those meters?
There used to be meters.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we've been down there almost 70 years, and I can remember some people would get mad. They had to put a nickel in that meter.
One time there was a penny.
Yeah, it's pennies, nickels, and dimes, I think, and then it got up to a quarter. And my grandfather would have to give them their nickel back just to make satisfied. Let me pay for your parking.
Penny for your troubles.
And I mean, it made them mad to have to park it. That's where you see those little holes all over the sidewalks, about every 8 feet, where they came in and finally just cut them to the ground,
And so I think that's a consideration. I mean, having worked in Galveston and having oversight of the transit system too in that time frame, even though it's generated revenue and it's added some less chaos to seawall, it took a while for people to adjust to even paying on the seawall, especially with an app. I think they've adjusted now. So I do think that that'd be something to look at down the road when we become so successful. But I think we need to walk before we run on that. I wouldn't completely leave it off the table, but I think the first thing to do would be, let's be successful in getting people to go to that garage, to park downtown, to fill up the streets, to fill up the stores. And if that's a discussion we need to have later, because it may be that eventually shop owners say, wait a minute, people are just hogging all the spaces. I need them to turn over and get more people in here. Then maybe we could look at some kind of parking app or something like that. But I'd rather have the other success first. And Randy, as a store owner, probably would, and I'm sure a lot of the others would.
If the parking garage is where it's at, you could get to anywhere downtown Nacogdoches in the same time that it would take you to walk from the furthest point of either Lowe's or Walmart to their front door. Not that big a deal, you know, at all.
So, and Dr. Gandy's point on, and kind of married into your point, Riggs, you know, for special events and high volume things, I mean, any of us that go to a concert or a sporting event, you expect to pay for premium
Correct.
parking. You know, that might be the thing to look at, as you mentioned, as opposed to the person coming to shop,
Right.
you know, downtown or something. So that might be, I think
It-
that's a thought.
And admittedly, I love the fact that we can go to, a family can go to an SFA football game and not have to pay to park too. So there can also be a benefit built in there that you might actually do better by, and have more sales tax receipts by not, at least until it becomes so unmanageable that you don't have a choice to kind of wean some down. At least those that want to pay. Those are planning on spending money. Again, more or less, they're close to 30% design, just in terms of just a general schematic, but that isn't into hard design. But this is something that could be moved fairly quickly. We do have some additional ARPA funds. We have yet to be utilized. But potential sources, those are just some of them. I mentioned the EDA, that's the one we're gonna go after first. Community project funding is what we went after, and basically everything got nixed nationwide for, I believe, most of the delegation. FTA, which is usually, unless it's a special call for projects, usually falls for cities over 50,000, and then obviously the public-private partnership piece is something that we are looking at right now. Bonita Creek, very quickly, about $4 million of improvements, definitely a much greener space, trying to create something that will be like in our, so having worked on some of the projects in the woodlands as well, because this is a water of the U.S., we don't have some of the capability to use it like detention. The Woodlands Waterway was actually a ditch before, if you've ever looked at that history. But that being said, we can do a lot in terms of dressing it up. It looks like a back door right now, kind of like a lot of North Street does. And we just had an award of TxDOT funds to do a pedestrian plan. That just occurred at TxDOT Commission in the last month. So this would connect to that, and the goal would be dress it up, make it walkable, connect it to all the way down, to the fire station, the soccer fields, ultimately to North and the farmers market. So again, if you look nice, sometimes you get nice results. If you use it like a storage yard back there behind, like we've got a lot of vehicles, old vehicles back there, that's probably not, you're not going to get the Galleria in Houston with that. So 12-foot wide path, pedestrian amenities, even some of those additional emergency boxes, things like that, wayfinding, more historical components as well, or at least direct people to some of the ones we already have. Same thing, there are some several pots of money, including some of the TxDOT ones and trails that we do qualify for, EDA as well. So again, everything in this plan was put in with some intent that we could at least go down a pathway for some funding assistance, either private or public. In many cases, we want to at least have several or more than one public option for grant activities. Again, this is not a long project to do if you can bring enough money to bear. And again, there will be future project calls. One reason we put in for the planning funds for North is, again, making it shovel ready. So that's why we submitted for a planning phase first. If you look at the TxDOT Commission minutes, you can see there were only a few that did planning, but the ones that already did planning were getting $4 and $5 million awards. And some of them weren't really big cities either. So again, get as much of this shovel ready as possible and keep chipping away with the axe at the funding sources. Festival Park. This has been looked at over the years. Obviously, There were always a lot of concerts in NAC. You can see how it's done with the rig down. 70s, 80s, obviously, a lot of concerts at the Coliseum. There is a considerable amount of potential capital built into the proposed improvements. However, they don't all have to be done, and they don't all have to be done at once. But if you also look at those, of all those things out there, in terms of the public input for Festival Park, community events and festivals were very high, and then as was performance, that was right there. So I think it's kind of fair to say that we really hit probably the maximum capacity with this last rig down. From a management standpoint, from a law enforcement standpoint, a crowd standpoint, and parking, if we had more parking with the garage and you had something more structured to it, it would definitely be easier to serve that event or a event back there. Now, you wouldn't be able to park rigs everywhere back there either, but, it might be a good problem to have. Again, let me run through these real quick. And I think we have, as you can see, they've got everything from a separate water feature, basically a bus pull through and Uber drop off. I think to the left of the stage, that would be a bus pull through roadie type setup. And what they included was the full shooting match. And that included basically creating a mini Woodlands amphitheater, even with costing for the sail type shade structures and everything. The reason they did that, to at least give us an idea what that would cost. Now, it doesn't mean it's going to be paid by the city or general fund, but it does give us some options. And the good thing about going through this part of the exercise is up till now, when they closed out one of the studies back in 20 years ago, early 2000s, I think, or late 90s, they didn't take it further. And because it's waters of the U.S., the assumption had been, we're going to have to do all kinds of remedial work, mitigation, to be able to do any improvements there. What they have right now, what we have, is a verbal that it is possible to obtain a letter of no impact from the Corps of Engineers. So we're working on that with the Goodman consultant team and Case's shop and Mike's, and we're submitting that next. So that right there, even just going through that part of the exercise makes it useful. Public buildings, the public buildings first. We did also take a look at, and even the building next to us is held by a 501. So you have this building, you obviously have the building adjacent to us that the Bright Foundation has, and you have the fire station. Those are really some of the big ones. They do have very high costs, typically per foot, to repurpose. But one of the things where we believe, and they've looked at some of the demand numbers, that there would likely be some demand for would be, as the city grows, is this was a hotel. And would this make a nice boutique hotel, especially if there was parking and a concert venue behind us? And so it's kind of in that vein that they went through that analysis. And yes, some of those may take some philanthropic or other parties involved to make that final push. But with the growth of SFA, with the use of the Fredonia and the success, we do think that is definitely something that maybe down the road we'd even put an RFQ together for consideration. Let's see. And obviously the fire station, countless people have already said, if you had a concert venue and you got a garage there, and that'd make a heck of a college bar restaurant type venue, and it probably would. And so never say never. Might happen faster than you think. Yes, this goes back into some of the demand. It kind of general timelines on some of these pieces. I think Robert would probably argue with those timelines that they might be too aggressive because he's dealing with a historic building, but thank God they're dealing with the biggest one here. That's kind of all the work to date. This kind of oversimplifies it, but it definitely was a lot. But I'd be happy, or Mike, happy to take any questions.
Got one question, Rick, or comment. You know, I don't know how you would get in touch with Moody's to see if they would be interested.
I think I should be able to be. Their foundation, you know, of course, their Texas-based foundation funded the Moody Center at UT to the tune of $100 million.
$500,000 to Nacogdoches
Education,
Education Foundation.
Yeah.
Isn't that right, Robert?
I think it was 350 and it's over 2
Yeah.
or something, but
Right,
yes,
yeah.
it's significant.
Yeah.
It is, it could go up to 5.
I mean, I guess all they had to do was ask for it, and they got it.
Yeah.
You know, we know he's the stepchild that lives out here in Thor's old house, or the Black Sheep. But you know, you never know if you ask when it's the right time and the right project. You know.
well, I can say that their foundation, I think, is approaching maybe at $5 billion at this point, and their spend rate that they need to achieve. Definitely still have contacts back in Galveston with several of the other families, and so and some others actually with that family as well. So I can help push that ball. I can't, and they can always just tell me get back off the island.
You don't ever know.
They may tell me that.
You know.
I have a question.
Sure.
When you're looking for monies at the state level, you're asking for these grants, or even at the federal, do you ask to build something, or do you ask can you ask to acquire something that's important? You know, for instance, like the parking garage. If you're looking at it and say, okay, we need this money to build a parking garage, and we know because of the timing, we can't get the money fast enough. Can you have an ask to say, okay, there is a parking garage downtown and we need to acquire that? Can you ask for those funds, or does it have to be a build type scenario?
It typically is. It's kind of like and here's why I would say that. If you're looking at the roadway side, let's say we're federally funding roadway expansions, they won't fund rehabilitations, but they'll fund expansions, typically, of capacity. So in the case of EDA, they would be looking at the expanded parking capacity, hence the new component, tied to downtown commerce. And because we're going to submit this portion through the disaster recovery piece, I don't think, is that map in this? That map's not in this one, is it? That map, Hurricane Barrel map. So there's a Hurricane Barrel map. So part of what we've done in working with EDA, and we've had a couple of conference calls, our part of the region is technically on the map for Hurricane Barrel from a year and a half ago. And so the likely max on this ask is probably in the 5 million range, but we're doing the full submittal. We're also mentioning there's potential for overmatch. And they're going to look at it from the perspective of we fall in the map of what has been considered by the feds a even tangentially affected floodplain area. We're proposing a garage with more spaces and new FTEs downtown. So it's everything goes back to that new commerce, new activities, and we're also doing it outside the floodplain. So that's also why we've crafted it that way. So I would say it's typically going to be, now the other thing I'll say from the transportation perspective, having worked at HGAC and working closely with the DOT and TxDOT, typically what they won't pay for is the right-of-way acquisition. So they want you to get all that right-of-way done and as much environmental clearance done as possible and get it. Now, the closer you get to shovel ready, that's when you can get that trigger of, oh, it's shovel ready and it meets our requirements, We're looking for something to fund because a lot of people are making asks for things that are not yet, not at 30% design, don't have an environmental clearance, may not have their environmental document yet. If you have those items checked already, they're looking at it and going, wait a minute. They can go ahead and go to final design and get that thing bid. And we need, because their box they need to check is that money is getting spent in a fairly close time frame of that fiscal year of the award.
So realistically, if you go and you haven't asked for these funds for this parking facility, what would be a timeframe to get some approval to say, yep, this is gonna meet it and we're gonna be able to fund it? What's the timeframe you think on that?
So let's say it is an FY 20, let's see if I've got this one. I may be able to answer that more directly in here. I think this implementation timeline kind of gives you some idea. So you're probably really looking at, in all honesty, if you go ahead and get let's say you're going to go ahead and do your design and eat that on the front, and let's say that award comes. I mean, you could realistically, I know they've kind of mapped it out as a year, and that's probably fair. So just in terms of the design side, we would probably have some overlap between the award of money, the availability. The other thing is the availability of money. So the availability of it when it's with this next call, the money wouldn't be available till October 1st, correct?
There'd be some additional lag. Yeah.
So it'd be a lag. It'd be some lag to it, but getting it ready, and then of course going through the bid process. The interesting thing is about this. Unlike Federal Transit Administration, EDA, I don't think we have to worry about Davis-Bacon. So you do not have to follow all of the same federal clauses. If you had to follow Davis-Bacon in terms of wage rates and in terms of, I can tell you, having dealt with FTA, you're dealing with even coordination on unions because you have to check that box on some of the union requirements because you're even dealing with bus-related items. So do I think we'd be able to access that money a year from now? Yes. Do I think you can begin the process once you know that there's an award? Now, the only hiccup there might be, if there's components of it you have to get done now versus items let's say they award $5 million out of 15. Let's just use that number. I would go ahead and try to set up either a bid alternate going through that process and not have a notice to proceed for those components until we're cleared on the grant side to do so. So it could be the extra floor. It could be the elevator. I know that, and I think when we talk about the airport, it's similar. It's not the same, but it is similar. You still have some of their constraints that come with their money. So I would think of it that way. Again, EDA is a little bit easier than FTA. FTA is a lot easier than TxDOT. And then, of course, remember, once we get into, so I don't know if that answers your question.
What I'm trying to determine is, without messing up the ability to go get money, how can we go ahead and start the process and start funding and start building something knowing that we can capture some money to be paid back versus doing something and then saying, okay, we've shut off the ability to get back to help with it.
And so I know y'all are working on some design concepts. So the sooner that we can look at some of those design concepts with the consultant team, it's probably the better. I know we're about to submit to the EDA, and there might be some things that are very discrete in there that can be just separated. So you know what? Or it could be, hey, we've put this together. This is really overmatch. I think that the fact we have the letter intent already, at least we've both decided we're going to agree to move forward on, try to come together on this project. that ground lease piece could also be a very important piece, because that's that step towards really the public-private partnership component. And so I think we'll probably have to kind of workshop this with your team and look at what components are most likely to be funded under different calls. Now, granted, we're also preparing for the federal call for projects after we get past the first of the year as well. And we have already had some initial discussions with Congressman Sessions about that.
The way I understand it, Robert, if we could get some of your design concepts,
Or at least what your thoughts are on it, yeah.
and then we could give it to Goodman, right? Or do it internally. but
Correct. Probably
Goodman-
both. It'll
yeah,
probably be both.
It'd be internally, and Goodman would look at it and say, we've already had an experience with this, we're not gonna get any funding, you know? But if you do this one, you know, yeah, you're gonna get funding. So I think if we had your design or.
Even the
website-
concept, before it goes to past,
Yeah.
to 60% plans, just 30 would be good.
Enough to where they know how to go get the money and they know what you need to get the money, you know, so.
We keep throwing it back and forth because, we're trying to make it where it suits our needs, but it's expandable to suit the needs of the community when available.
Right.
And there's different thoughts, one is, do we build one deck, try to use the bottom, do you build one deck with the ability to expand, or do we build a facility up front with the ability to expand the back? I know we have that green space, I know it's floodplain area, but if we could build something up front and then bolt on something larger on the back to accommodate it, but we just don't know. And to be honest with you, the contractor we're using right now that we're speaking with, we can't get a lot of information out of them because they want to have 2 or 3 different designs. Well, that's just taking longer, because if we don't get funded from any source, it's going to limit our ability to do more that we feel that we're capable of doing. If we know there's funding sources there, then we can be more grand in how we're going to build this thing out. And time is not our friend, and everybody knows that.
Yeah.
But we need to move forward with something, or we're not going to have parking for our employees when we have the.
And our ability to effectively protect some of your front-end investment, we need this would not be using the ARPA funds. We need either EDA, or we need the congressionally directed funding side to go ahead, and the community project funding side to go ahead and land us a project, even a small project. Because once we do that, then we have the capability to then do what's called pre-award authority. And so we need some federal recognition of the project under that. And once we do that, then potentially, and this was the model Mr. Mitchell used in the Woodlands and in Galveston, was, except he was using FTA. So keep in mind, FTA in that case, he was fronting the project after the pre-award authority was given. And again, FTA was a little bit different animal. You could get the pre-award authority before you got any funding award. You could get the environmental check off alone, and then they would give you that. This would be a little bit different because we can't use that. But if we let's say we got an EDA award, then we would have one pathway to go ahead and effectively federalize at least a significant portion of that project. And then we could take other cuts, maybe through annual appropriations, and maybe get to the point we, pay for half of it or more.
That's what we need we need a plan. We need to know what this facility will look like, but that number can be small or can be very, very large, and we're just not sure where that bounces. And I know the city can't foot it, and there's not much you can do other than just trying to go after this other money.
And we can't make them go any faster. I mean, we're in a kind of a catch-22 deal, like we need it now. Walk it through every office that you can get to in Austin, in Washington, whatever you can do, but it just kind of.
And I don't think the country's ready for me to run the whole country. This is Nacogdoches, it's tough enough.
How much do we have in ARPA?
About 1.2 million right now. But, and granted, that could be potentially part of the budget, theoretically, on this. Or, again, if we had an award of TxDOT funds, You know, that's something we could help even fund some of the pedestrian improvements. It's, that, the ARPA funds, ironically, even though it doesn't, you would think it would give us that foot in the door, because it's federal. However, it wasn't part of that award. It's any governmental purpose. It's very open-ended, though.
We're just having a hard time getting any estimate of what the value would be. You know, we talk about spaces, but when they say it's 25,000 or 50,000 a space, it's hard. I've even asked them, show me a recent garage that you've built. Price. And then we can say, this was pre-COVID, and we know there's gonna be additional pricing, but we know what the costs were then. We can go in through inflation and say, this is probably what the real number is. Now, we do have the foundation that's gonna be different if it was a flat versus what but we can build that back in. I can't get any numbers.
Well, let's just say this, and I'm, Mike being here. These are real numbers. Now, they've got a big 30% contingency on them.
Yeah.
But these are from COVID-built era ones that Goodman was associated with. They did others. So they did Galveston one, they did the one in Pflugerville, they did the one in, Bryan. So we could have them go back and obtain those. Now, you know, I'm not saying if y'all's guys, wait a minute, they won't give you a number, let me in a room with them.
We need something.
I'll turn all those numbers into a wet phone book. I'll get something out of them.
You know, we have heard numbers as low as 10 million, up to 20 or 25, and that's a huge delta to try to figure out what are we trying to hit. And then if we can, we can do a lot up front. We can fund a lot of this, but we don't wanna fund it and not be paid
Well-
back. We need to find some way to.
Well, the other thing is this, the last thing y'all need is, that's why this plan really does try to err on the side of not having some on the back end sticker shock. This is looking at with the cost escalation. Now, you know, before it was supply chain. I don't know if it's labor now. It might be labor,
It probably could be.
and I think it could be. I'm just playing devil's advocate on this.
But as we look at this plan, we look at, you know, Festival Park and the promenade, all that is tied to a parking garage.
Correct. It is the linchpin for everything.
If you can't get that, this becomes very little of value as a hotel and to be able to support other other festivals. We have to have a parking garage. We have to do that in the right capacity. We need to have the right volume or the right number of spaces. So, and I don't know how we get there, but that's, we're working on it. I know we all are, but that's critical. It is critical, so.
Well, we are here when y'all are ready.
Well, I can tell you this, as far as the council is concerned, you know, this whole project is number one. I mean.
Correct. We've expressed that to the,
That and the airport
Yep.
are our two deals.
to our
that-
federal representatives,
that-
yes.
That are absolutely paramount, you know. Now, I'll handle the hospital, you know,
We need to,
me and Jerry.
we need to figure out what our ask is and talk to our senator, state senator, and, you know, Congressman Sessions, and what can you do to help us as soon as possible? So the airport's a little, I think we can have some.
Do you want to talk about the airport? Is that going to make you even more red?
No, actually, I think the airport's the easier fix, short term.
Yeah.
Right now, like I said before, the timing is not right for our building, corporate building. The airport, we can do some things short term to give us time to do something long term at the airport. So, yeah, we can go to the airport, I guess, unless there's other questions.
Bill, did you have any thoughts? Scott?
I mean, I'm glad to hear Andy say that these two projects are front and
are.
center
This is,
because,
this is it. This is.
I mean, they're critical and we don't have, I think time is, critical too on it. I just want to make sure that from our standpoint, the city and ours, that we're not doing anything to delay it. And
No,
I
no.
understand that, you
No.
know, you're dealing with the state and you're dealing with the federal government and you can't control them.
That's the problem.
But we want to be prepared to not,
Well, let's just say this. One thing I was trying to say is, if it's anything that can help on the design, even potentially, we do have the ARPA getting into this shovel-ready scenario. If it means, again, I never realized we don't have a tax ID number. And there you go, back to the feds. I'm not blaming people, but once we can potentially make that transfer, and I do think those are some of gonna be the tough decisions. I know y'all don't get the big bucks, but let's just take that $1 million that over time has been moved over for economic development. That could be the first seed money for this body. And you really want to look at those high ROI items that are going to spread the wealth to the community on the back end in terms of commerce and also qualify as economic development projects. So let me get on to the airport. You can tell there's a lot of work on that. I'm not Elizabeth. She did a really good job, though. We appreciate her. So I'm not Wolpert either. So this is the airport layout plan. I think that, I don't know if that's a Cessna Citation there, but I'm sure we just want as many of those and bigger planes out there ultimately. And today, by the way, was out at the airport and Shannon gave a overview to the East Texas City Managers Association. We had a really good meeting, and I think apparently they also fly in as part of their program, so a lot of the other airports within our region, just as part of the flight training, so touch and go type stuff. So 20-year plan. This is, again, it's so there is some method to the madness, and it really reflects the goals on where we're going. And the last plan was 2008, good old Hurricane Ike. Hate to use certain years, but so what they did stakeholder work. They looked at the facility requirements based on everyone's input. They looked at what we had, and then, you do look at the money. You look at CIP, and then you lay it out there. You usually typically put in the plan more than what you can afford, but what you would like to have. Because if you don't have it in there, you got to go back and amend the plan at a later date. So the current runway is 5,000 feet, 75 feet wide. That resurfacing project is one of the first projects. It can be expanded, I believe, 1,000 feet?
Yeah.
About 1,000 feet, and that's also to 100-foot width. And I don't know class of aircraft that gets into here. I think it is like at least a bigger Cessna Citation in there. So as you can see, there's part of the ALP is also looking at, not just looking at all of our current components, and that identifies all the hangars, where the current administration building is. I know we have a very small pilot's lounge, and I know that the Bright Foundation, Elliott Foundation, and a host of others have had an interest in maybe moving that along with the airport committee. Oh, there it is. It's kind of the
last plan that was done was in 2008, and I asked Colin the other day in a meeting, what did we do with that plan? And we basically put it on a shelf.
Yep.
And let dust get on it, on top of that shelf up there. We're not gonna do that with this, I'm not gonna be here 20 years, but, I mean.
Case will. We always have that. No matter what it is, we always look back at Case, and everyone says, well, I won't be here 30 years from now. I'm like, you will. You got little ones, and you're younger than we are.
I'd like to see some of this come to fruition before I move on.
Yeah. How you think Bill Elliott feels,
Right here every day. You see something
I can imagine.
out of the saw, still.
Yeah, y'all may get to see more of it than I do some days. Don't even know. I may get to see planes, maybe not up in the sky. I don't know about that. So I'll do my best. So again, it would, I think, bump up the typical class of aircraft, I think, one notch. Isn't that right? It's basically not a huge one in terms of, but the design criteria would be focusing on the next class of business jet. Okay, there you go. There's the, you have to hear it from me. That's, so extending the runway, the width, extend the taxiway, weather system, and also additional hangar development. You know, the hangar piece, that's another thing. We may also need to go back. One thing we've talked about internally is one of the next steps is looking at a business plan, not just your facilities plan, but looking at what it will take to maintain everything long-term and also have enough ongoing expansion so you're not just really boxed in. That additional hangar development, I think, is going to be critical to attract some of the different classes in a long-term way of aircraft here, or to expand into some type of charter type service at least down the road. The terminal building, the fuel farm, maintenance. We do need a rental car area. There is the vertical takeoff area. Charging. You know, one of the big things I think you're going to see too, you've probably already seen a little bit, that the vertical takeoff drone type passenger drones are probably not that far away. I think Bill, you're going to get to see that. You may get to ride in them to the golf course or something. But I think that's coming, and they're going to probably, you know how it's kind of like the iPhone. It's gonna move fast once it starts hitting. I just don't want to be you know, it's bad enough getting a helicopter, but some with little bitty blades instead of one big. I'm gonna let Bill go on that one first. Yeah, I'm just going to drive. Yeah.
Fossil fuel.
Yeah. I don't want a little kid flying a kite take out what I'm flying in. Yeah. But talked about a hotel, restaurant footprint, as well as obviously the terminal building. I think could be a great boon. And then, you know, if we had, I know UT is this kind of uncharted territory, but since College Station has a nice airport and restaurant and serve steaks in it, I think UT should know that they can't let them compete since they have 2/3 of the PUF funds. I'm going to put that out there publicly so they can. Since they had that little football game, I don't want to talk. You know, I only produced one Aggie, so I know none of y'all, rest of y'all, want to talk about that. So there's kind of the layout, including where the terminal would be. Those aren't MiGs or anything on the runway. No, they kind of look like it from a distance. It looks like some kind of intelligence assessment. Future tower. That is one of the items that I talked a little bit with Senator Nichols today, and we're trying to set up a kind of a delegation meeting in the very near future. You're copied on some things, as is Scott, and so a lot to be excited about. And I think our delegation is there to support us. One thing Senator Nichols mentioned is he worked very hard to kind of undo some of the earmark process that was effectively siphoning off a lot of the money for the statewide that was occurring up until 2 years ago. So he said right now, and he was very wise to mention this because I actually met Senator Nichols years ago back when he was on the Texas Transportation Commission and I worked at HGAC. And he was very wise to remind us all that right now the legislature has a surplus, but you go back to the good old 80s, y'all remember that. Wasn't always the case. So right now, it's headed the right direction. I think he'll meet with a few of us and give us a briefing on so we're in the know on how the process will run, and also may even give us some other tips on how to move forward. Again, it's broken into phases, obviously. And the one thing that Senator Nichols also mentioned is that, and he goes, Rick, you should know this. They like overmatch. You know that. It's about all the HGAC days. So remember, it's TxDOT. Anything that gets overmatched, anything that's shovel ready is going to rise to the funding occasion. So I would say, just like on the garage, Roberts, be thinking about that. Anything we can do, y'all or us together, or this body, once there's money, to even very intentionally, doesn't have to be a lot of cost, but even move forward on design, get things shovel ready, get environmental clearances, that raises the bar, and then if anybody brings overmatch to it, then it goes even further higher on the rank of possibly getting funded.
We've got how much money for the bond?
Once we would sell all of it, was it 9 million? Once we sell everything, I think it's around either 7 or 9.
So we have that money that we haven't spent but $500,000.
Yeah, I think we've only authorized a very small portion of it on the design for the runway for our match.
The bulk of it is dedicated to terminal development, but again, those improvements are all kind of part of the same proposition.
Okay.
So if there's preliminary design elements we can initiate now, we can use that money for that purpose.
There's a little bit closer shot of it for phase one. I think if you look at the apron, I think that's also a critical piece. I know y'all have been excited about the golf thing coming, and I think, and this is me, not being a golfer, but being one that likes to dress like one is kind of my urban camouflage, is I think the key will be what components can we implement that'll help, not necessarily help us with those business jets out there, but help us capture their dollars in the community. That's the Galveston County tourist piece in me that says, how can we capture their dollars and recycle those?
It's one of those things that all the past, you talked about 2008, that plan. I think the airport historically has been a place that was there if you needed it. Yeah. And I know Robert and I feel this way based on the comment that Dr. Gandy made. I think he feels the same, that it has to be an economic development source and a piece of that plan that is used to drive economic development, as opposed to just being a place that's there
Correct.
if someone needs it. And I think that's the difference to me of where the focus has to be. And I know it is, and the only thing that can slow it down is adding, 2 or 3 more government entities in it, which is when you got FAA, TxDOT.
That's what I'm saying, is
So-
if we'd have took that plan and implemented some of it,
But we didn't, and so we are now, and now we've got to do it.
We need it, and we sat around for the last, let's see, 12,
Yeah.
how long? I can't add.
It's 2008.
Yeah.
But we're all saying the exact right things, but we've got to take action.
Right.
The two things we need, and we discussed it in a prior meeting about the airport, is we have to have a place to park aircraft. If we have more people coming in, larger aircraft, we must have a place to park as soon as possible. 2, we must have a facilities they can come in, use the restroom, and if they want to have a little meeting or wait for someone to pick them up, that is nice, that is unlocked, that is manned or at least occupied, so they can come in and do those. And 3, sooner than later, we need to have a tower, even if it's a private contract tower, because you can't bring aircraft in if you can't get them on the ground because of weather. But the 2 things I think we can do sooner, it would be parking area and a FBO, even if it is a temporary. We need to do that, and we don't have a year or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5, because once they go to Longview or go to some other airport, we're going to lose them. We have to have those now, and we have to find a way to do it. And if there needs to be private funding there to make that happen, what's that value? How do we make it work? And let's expedite it. Let's make it happen.
I would add one more thing on top of that, Robert, too. It's a level of customer service.
Yeah.
Because the folks that are coming in associated with UT or with big business or with this golf course, they are accustomed to a level of service, not just, there's no one there to unlock the door to use. I mean, like, it is a service.
And
that we've got to, that's an aspect that's not big money, that's focus and intent.
Well, you also have to remember, this is supposed to operate as an enterprise fund, so it really is operated on a shoestring because it doesn't generate enough revenue. This is the elephant in the room I want to talk about. You got to start talking about going up on the fuel rates, and you got to talk about going up on the lease rates and the square footage. And that's the part no one really wants to talk about. We can't, the long-term play can't be pumping in general fund with it. It'd be one thing if we have some type B money and we can do some very strategic, very strategic capital improvements that then spin off more revenue. But the one thing to remember is, and again, I had at another place, and I have their golf hat. That's funny. We had a golf course that was in the red, got it into the black. To do that, you ticked off some people. We had to tweak the rates. We had to play because you know what we had? We had people that were, a lot of the users there weren't that they were not locals. They're from Austin. And then some of those folks in those great big houses that treated it like it was their, actually that was, in that case, it was a developer built and then handed to the city because it was an albatross financially for them. So they just gave it to the city. Oh, don't you want this luxury golf course and all the people that came with it and all their, and so I can tell you in the 21 ice storm, no one that lived in a trailer made one complaint to the city. But those folks that lived on that golf course behind that gated community, you believe me, they generated 10 times the calls. So we're probably going to have to look at that business plan piece because I think that's critical that we set this, everything we're doing, whether it's the downtown garage, whether it's highest and best use of the buildings. Ultimately, it's not so we can go up on taxes, none of that. It's so we can create additional revenue, maybe that everybody's individual tax rates actually go down, not up, and that we set up long-term economic sustainability that floats more people's boats. So right now, do I think we probably have some folks own a couple, I think there's a reason we're full out there. It's because probably, like you said, well, you could always put your plane out there. Do I think if we start tweaking some of those things, some people will pick up and leave? Maybe. Will other people that have more means willing to pay come? Maybe. That might be part of the formula. We don't know yet because we need to be very deliberate in how we break down those numbers.
Well, right now, what I would like to see is two things. One, what facilities do we need right now that would get us through the next 18 months? And what is the cost to get those facilities? If it's a temporary, like I said, FBO or some facility there, what does that cost? What does it cost us to get enough parking? What can we get by with that the FAA will let us get by with? What cap parking? Can we have asphalt parking? Will it tie into what we have now? And what does that cost? We need to know what those costs are for those two items. Then, what is it going to cost to maintain a service out there that when someone flies in, that we meet them, we get them out of the planes, if we fuel them, whatever it is, and what is that cost going to be? How much can the city shoulder right now? And then what is that excess, or what is the deficiency that we have to cover? That's the most important thing, because then it's a business decision for this community to say, are we going to let that opportunity leave us, then we may not ever get it back, or do we have to privately fund it up front through some type of donation, gifting, or something, even, I don't know, whatever it is, to make it happen. But we can't be slow enough to say, let's find this funding, let's come in, let's build this later. We don't have I say 18 months, I'd love to have a facility out there before that to help people and show them we're there.
Well, one
So
thing
we need that number.
I might suggest, as soon as we can get a tax ID, that this body potentially look at as a business plan, as an adjunct to this, in attaching the operational numbers and then prioritizing some of those other pieces based on those. Now, some of the data that the Woolpert has probably would feed into that. Do you want to speak to that?
Well, and I wanted to cover this phase one. Mike New, Executive Director of Development and Infrastructure. What you see on this graphic on your screen now, and speaking to Robert's point, one of our discussions is, when Woolpert put this plan together, they laid out different phases. They didn't put them in any particular order. They numbered them, but truthfully, it's based on what our priorities are as we build them. We have talked about that secondary entrance, which would eventually be our new primary entrance on the southeast side. We're already working toward that end. But to enhance some of those hangar spaces and taxiways and terminal accessories right there on that southeast side that would be connected to that new entrance, ultimately, that is our goal. But the amount of dirt work and site grading and clearing that we'd have to do would take time. Working with TxDOT to get that entrance approved, get what they need done. We're already working on the traffic impact analysis for connection to 7, but that's going to take time. What would meet the short-term goal, and we can work toward, is looking at the area around HCH's current hangar. Could there be additional apron asphalt laid out simply just to park additional planes? Because that's our goal. That would not take and could still meet, I think, again, we would run these through the TxDOT planners without going through a more formal process, just saying, hey, is this going to create a pencil-in change to the airport layout plan? We'll work towards the goal of not having to do that. Where we can drop something in, it still meets the guidelines of the plan, we can move forward on something. If it's a temporary building, there may be some other standards we'd have to comply with, site-specific, but is it in a location that's compatible? And that's what we'll focus on, because we can run with those things, and if it's not affecting the flight path or the flight traffic on that footprint of the airport, we'll have more flexibility to work with that and move quickly. We can start on some of the environmental related to the detention pond, or even extending some of the underground infrastructure to get, if we're going to do an FBO temporary building, make sure we're getting that water and potentially, well, I can't say sewer, but getting that infrastructure in place to move that building as quickly as we need to. So we are making some adjustments in what we're going to put at the front of the line in the next steps of what we do. Some of that design work's part of that process.
And the other part of that too is if we could then attach, let's say, the phasing of the hangars to a business plan, and then determine, okay, where can we put our money? Where else can we put our money that might actually increase the revenue stream sooner on some of those other critical CIP type decisions?
Mike, could you start that process now as far as reaching out to TxDOT? You know, if we could do that.
We've talked with, initially, this is just this week. We've already started the process of getting a traffic impact analysis on 7. That's to see how quickly we can move on that entrance road, the new path. We know we're not going to have time within a short time frame to really do any sort of site grading and clearing to get us the apron asphalt that we need. So we look at another location for that. Around that HCH hangar space might be that ideal location. So yes, it's a matter of just engaging a firm to just ensure that the environmental one and the soil and our infrastructure is there and can be extended fairly reasonably. I'd have to go back and work with Colin on if we see some major obstacles, but we've discussed that's probably doable. It's just a matter of getting someone to draw it out for us.
And we can use some of the bond funds for that.
Right now, the funding, let's just figure out where we put a temporary FBO and how much spacing can we get out there without having to jump through too many hoops. What kind of, and what would that give us as far as parking some planes? And then what is that gonna cost? Once we get that and say, okay, this is the request, whatever that number is, and then we worry about that, the funding, and then we push on with the other stuff. But we have to get a building out there and parking. If we don't do it, we're gonna lose them.
The apron,
Sorry, but we will.
the apron and the temporary FBO,
Next week.
1. 2 more long-term would be having a tower and getting that primary entrance established.
If you could just
Play
get
this
those,
course.
get that one
So, I
done,
mean, that's next week that's happening.
get a number.
And that's why I said we have to move on this ASAP. And let's figure out what's gonna cost, and then we'll figure out the funding. We'll figure out how we get there.
I will say
Please.
this, without, and I don't want anybody to misunderstand me, but Mike has taken over airport now since Larissa's been gone.
That was a question I was gonna ask. so.
He is,
Because he's over infrastructure. Now, obviously, I had Shoals Field under me
Yeah.
as an ACM in Galveston, so I can, because of my economic development transportation nexus. So anytime, again, I've already reached out to our delegation. We're going to try to get a meeting and probably include a couple other parties on how we can advance things, so.
And I'll tell you, I've never heard Colin speak. I mean, I never even knew he was there. And, I mean, he brings something to the table. I mean, he's not, stupid at all. And I don't know where he's been.
He's an Aggie pushed out in a hanger, so.
And I think where we are is, I think the plans are great and where we are where we are, or the past is the past.
Right.
And it's up to, I mean, quite frankly, the leadership of this community, which is us and in this room and others, to get it done.
Right.
I think that's where, and the moves are being made to do that. We have a good
Yep.
plan and plans in process. We just gotta keep moving it forward
It won't,
quickly.
it will not be because we're not doing anything. It will be because we're waiting on something from, either state or a federal piece.
You know, there's, like I said, right now, what I see as far as people coming in from there, from the golf course and others, if they don't have a place to park a plane, they're not gonna land. That's one. So unless they can park a plane, two, if we have a facility that is nice for them to get out of the plane and be there until we have some courtesy or some ability to get them to the next spot, that's the next thing. Then the third one, we can build both of those, but if we don't get a tower or some way to land a plane in weather, we're gonna lose them again. And all those can be working at the same time. We can be working on the parking, working on the facilities, and then start working at the federal level, because that'll be a federal, I believe, the tower. And let's find out what the minimum we can do to get a flight, you know, some type of communication there. And then let's all be working at the same time and find out what those costs are, and let's see how we're gonna get it funded. But until we know what our real short-term ask is, we're wasting time. And I know that y'all are doing a great job, and I'm not being critical at all, but we have to figure out how we're gonna cover this up.
I do think at a, maybe at a micro level, and this may be beneficial for this group to discuss, or at least review, what does that business model look like for that additional apron and FBO? And from the time a plane ventures in, lands on the runway, gets taxied over, to when that individual leaves and goes wherever they're gonna go, what does that little business model look like?
That's
You
what
know, are
we're-
we
that's part of
meeting
what
all
we're
those
talking about.
milestones? Because it's not just going to be a building and a piece of asphalt. It's gonna be, do we need additional courtesy vehicles? Do we need to staff someone there
To actually
24/7?
have the full economic
There's other
impact
components to that. And
where we're,
the business plan is more long-term. It's about the scope of what this ALP is reaching for, but we probably need to look at a business model that's gonna accomplish the short-term goals well.
I agree, and I think that what Dr. Kennedy talked, you know, we have the ability because of relationships that we have locally with, say, the golf course, for example, knowledge of when people are gonna be coming in. There is opportunity there for us to do something about it, even with what we have right now from a customer service standpoint, to put our best foot forward. And even, like we've talked about at some point, having coming soon, you know, the plans laid out, like, there's opportunity, because we're gonna have some idea when some of these people are coming in, and we can put our best foot forward, even when it is what it is out there today. I think there's opportunities from a service level that we can take advantage of those opportunities, because we do have the context to know some of that stuff.
There are many partners in this community that could help bridge some of those services. Just, I'm thinking right now, you know, even if you had two vehicles out there that are SUV type vehicles.
I mean, like old police cruisers?
Well, you could say that, or, you know, we have dealerships here that probably would service vehicles out there to have their name on it and get their face in front of these spenders as well. And even if it's short term, if they say, we'll provide this for 6 months or a year, these vehicles, you just need to have someone that can drive, can bring people out there, and then we now have the vehicle, now we need someone to put in the vehicle to drive it, and we can make that work, but we have to come up with a solution, a plan. And it's
Yeah.
gonna take many people sitting down to say, what are the needs, and then how do we bridge that? But we have to move forward, we just have to, as
Yeah.
Bill has said before, this golf course and Scott is here, and it's happening.
We don't want to, since we have a revenue versus service level, we certainly don't want to have a trustee driving an old patrol car,
Yeah, you're right.
running the shuttle in a jumpsuit, but
I
it's just an idea. I've seen some strange things in other places.
I have landed in airports where the courtesy car is an old cruiser that may or
Bluesmobile.
may not crank, but they have it for you to use. If you're worried about getting back to the airport, because it's horrible. Still has a light on the side, and so it's just, so we don't need that. We
That's
need
so
to-
you can find your way back
and I
if
think
you
that's
have
what
to.
it is, but, yeah, we need to have, those facilities, and we need to crawl, walk, and then run, but we need to crawl. We need to be moving. We sure do. So, thank you, but I do appreciate, what the city's doing, and I know that there's a lot of lifting, airport, at the downtown, but we have so many opportunities now, and we can't let that pass it. And maybe we need to hire someone that's building the, either the Chick-fil-A or the golf course. And I think Scott recommended that, or Randy or someone, to say, let's get them on board, because they know how to move forward. And let's make it happen.
This is one thing they didn't have the state, the only thing they had their way up there was the city. And that went smooth.
That went smooth.
I can tell you, Aldi moves things fast, having been somewhere else where we built one from the ground up. So,
Yeah.
and they
We got compliments from everybody that here lately that's built. We hadn't had any. It's not like it used to be. Let me put it.
well, let's just say this: from our nationals that come in, we don't get complaints. I'll put it that way. The folks that build nationally, that's why you've seen Chick-fil-A move like it did. One of the other ones didn't move quite as fast because, again, they didn't. I think you had one of the owners trying to tell the contractor, no, don't do that. And we're saying, no, you got to do that, or you ain't going to get a CO. So that's a little bit different. So there's the other phases. That's where you get into the hangars, large hangars. And additionally, these are the type of items that we need to start dropping into that business model. You know, do you build it and is it revenue neutral, or do you build it, or is it actually a drain? Or do you need to build something that's revenue positive so you can then build something else that's either neutral or a drain, and then you're not carrying it for longer. And so kind of the sequencing, that's where I think the business plan would be beneficial. It would help give y'all the ability to know, okay, if we pull the trigger on this, that may help us run the other thing. But if we do the other thing first, we're going to actually drive the O&M up on this is supposed to operate as an enterprise fund, meaning we're not supposed to feed it from the city general fund. Again, think about that hospital over there. And so those are some of those decisions that may not be intuitive, but if we give y'all the right tools, and it'll help us. It's kind of hard to make a recommendation like, oh yeah, build that first, and then go, oops, sorry. If you wanted 4 season service, you're gonna have to do something down from a Motel 6, because now we can't afford to. Yeah.
You know, when you look at this plan, as well as the downtown plan that we've been looking at, 6 years ago, we didn't have the UTSFA merger come together and that opportunity and the growth that we're hearing now with enrollment. We didn't have a golf course that had that capacity that is gonna grow exponentially in our community. And we also didn't have businesses now looking at us saying, we wanna come into this town. So even in our airport, we haven't had the traffic in the past, but it can rapidly grow, and we need to be moving ahead. And I think that our ask when we go out to the state and federal, we're gonna have a great story to sell. We just need to know what our ask is to go to them. And so we're in a great position.
And we're teeing
Part
up.
of that
Yeah, go
too,
ahead.
Robert, is if you just look at the private investment downtown, like Kim Crisp, Dennis White, your group, the Elliott Electric, don't have that kind of funds, but my buildings have never looked better. I mean, I've spent some money on some new doors and backup and process, but they still come in there and rub around on a window, and then they'll leave. I'll get it done. So
It's a labor. So there's the subsequent phases. I mean, again, it keeps on going until you're in phase 4. I don't know what you're landing out there, B-52s or something. Maybe not that much. Okay, here's your costs. When I said it's everything you want, maybe more than you need, but it's better to have more in there than less. So if you thought that having something back at Festival Park was expensive, then start talking about planes and boats and all those other things like that. But again, you're talking about total cost of $300 million of all in. So sending the, they've already submitted the LP? Okay, yeah, so that's already done. There you go, and, I just want an armed air tractor that the city would have out there for code enforcement.
And for the benefit of the board, this is, if you'll go back, Rick, this is an AI generation of what the full build-out would potentially look like. I think they did it in fall season, but they had 4 different seasons planned out for the photos.
Why does it look like a military base in, I was gonna say somewhere east of Europe? I don't know. But that's, yeah.
All right.
Well, thank y'all.
Any questions? Good. Okay. Well, thank you for the report.
Thank you.
That's all we have on agenda items. We have any other questions or comments?
A comment, I wouldn't mind us to discuss how much of that approximate $1 million that eventually we'll get, that we might or could already let you know that this, when we get this money, we've got these funds designated. That'd be something to discuss at the next meeting.
You talking about the ARPA or?
Yeah, with the.
Well, or the $1 million set aside of general
I
fund.
mean, I think we need to make a commitment on that. I know we can't spend money that we don't have yet, but I mean, we're anticipating getting that. And
What we ought to do is lay out what we already have from bond funds, what we have yet to sell for because we were putting on the back end, and then drop in just 1 or 2 of the priority, let's say just dropping in the, what we think obviously we're looking at, we're at what plan set rate right now on the, ready to go to bid by January on the
That's the runway project.
runway. And then with that, what we estimate the design cost might be for some of those other early components like the apron and even some of the general site layout for another FBO or temporary FBO building or whatever. I think we ought to take the funding pot and the nearest near-term projects that we think could be there and then assign those costs and then determine, do you tap that million? Do you use the available bond funds?
Even use you mentioned identifying some design components for the garage that would meet federal standard if there are any.
Yeah, we can do that too.
We could use as a supplement of that to fund that, to make sure that the design is moving forward in a federally applicable way.
Yeah. So we can do that for both.
Well, one other report that I would like to hear next, our next meeting, since we're gonna have, or y'all will be having meetings with the state, Senator Nichols perhaps, and congressional, if what comes out of those conversations when they come back, what do they anticipate we can do or what we'll need to do in order to tap those funds? I think that's gonna be critical to know what, to what level they're gonna be able to help and how soon they would be able to help, what that timeline looks like. So if we could have that, if possible, it'd be nice for this group to have that report or something on that.
And we've got believe me, we've got a great delegation on both the state and federal side, and they're supportive, and we will even reach out to some of those other members after these initial meetings, spread that support.
Well, like I said, we have a great story to tell right now. At the airport, we have obviously the flight school that's out there now, and like I said, with SFA and UT and the golf course. So that's going to be I was going to say an easy sell. That's something we can sell. Downtown, we do have some investment. We have significant, and I know our building is probably just the renovation, not the cost of the building, is probably going to be $12 to $14 million.
You could have built the tower.
What's
Sorry.
that?
I said you could have built the tower at the airport.
So, we have that investment, and there's some other things downtown I think that are going to happen if we can get this garage. So it's important to get the garage, so we can scale up to the needs downtown. So we have these stories to tell. We just need to get in front of the right people and let them know that we now have an ask. And I do hope that we have the ability to go after grants by writing them. And I was critical. I mentioned it back in the time with SFA and the school district. There's money out there, and you've explained to us how much is out there that people tap into. And our community hasn't been I don't feel like that we've been tapping into some significant monies
We hadn't.
outside this community.
We hadn't.
And that's money that needs to come into this community. We all pay taxes. You know, Elliott, our company, pays a lot of taxes, federal and state taxes. People need to know that. And we need to get that funding here in this community, so.
And by the way, again, on North Street, that's $175,000 TxDOT award for a pedestrian plan. We're gonna meet with TxDOT in January. And our discussion on that is that they're likely going to add some additional planning funds to look at what's called access management. But that's a prerequisite phase. Once you get into that process and then work with them on design, because again, that is their corridor technically, get it shovel ready, then you see in the commission minutes, once you have something shovel ready, then you start talking about projects of 5-7 million. Imagine what 5 million would look like on North.
Yeah.
Imagine what 5 million is gonna look like out at the airport. So those are the type of, if you don't ask, you'll never, it's like Publishers Clearinghouse. If you don't play, you can't win.
You know, Robert, we had Louis Gomer before we had Pete Sessions. Louis didn't ask for nothing. He didn't do earmarks or appropriations or anything. And then we got Pete, and then we started getting a little money, you know. And now Pete's leaving, and we're gonna have Moran, and both of those
Like I said,
bring money back to their community from the federal standpoint, you know.
so many things are coming together for us right
That's
now.
right.
The other one that, you know, I can't express or stress enough is the SFA UT. We may not can get funding from UT for SFA now because they just went into that system, but they have a lot of contacts. And they know a lot of people in Austin, and they have, you know, delegations that work within that governmental entity all the time. All we need to know is have contacts, people that can help carry our message and our ask. And so everything's in the right spot now. We just need to know what we're going to need to ask for. That's
And
the
again,
biggest issue.
Randy mentioned it, y'all have mentioned it, but that's where your entities such as the Moody family, they were our UT donor.
Yeah.
So that alone, that's your nexus, it's through UT.
That's right. So all these things are in place. We're gonna be foolish if we can't get the right plans together and stage them and start asking. That's critical. And if we can do it, we'll be very successful very, very soon. I'm confident of that. So, any other questions for Rick? If not, any other questions? Motion to adjourn?
Second.
We're adjourned.
Thank y'all.